The warm morning sunlight enveloped the dining table in the Walsh household. Their colonial-style home in the quiet residential area of Newton, Massachusetts, was wrapped in morning tranquility. "Sarah, it's time for school," Rebecca Walsh called out to her 10-year-old daughter while cleaning up after breakfast. A meticulously prepared lunch box sat on the kitchen counter. At 39, Rebecca was a pharmacist who combined professional precision with maternal warmth. Sarah hurriedly stood up, taking her last bite. Her father Gregory watched her with his usual gentle eyes. At 43, the early wrinkles around his eyes revealed the hardships he'd endured as a salesman. "Dad, will you be home late again today?" Gregory's face showed a look of guilt. "I'm sorry, sweetie. Ever since the promotion, there's just been so much more work." Rebecca let out a small sigh at her husband's words. 3 months ago, Gregory had been promoted to sales manager at NextGen Pharmaceuticals. His new position at the headquarters in Kendall Square brought greater responsibilities and longer hours. Since then, he'd been coming home later and later, often absent even on weekends. They used to spend every weekend as a family, visiting nearby Cold Spring Park or watching the latest movies at the Chestnut Hill Theater. Gregory had been a devoted father, never missing one of Sarah's dance recitals. He took immense pride in his daughter's progress at Wilson Dance Academy. Rebecca reduced her work hours to 4 days a week at Health First Pharmacy in Newton Center to fully support her husband's promotion. Though she found fulfillment in her work as a pharmacist, family stability came first. She had no regrets about her decision. "Mom, I wish Dad could pick me up from today's lesson." Sarah, who attended Wilson Dance Academy, was a daddy's girl. With her bright and energetic personality, she was popular in class and particularly recognized for her ballet talent. Since Gregory became busy, Rebecca had been handling the transportation, but their daughter still yearned for time with her father. "I know, but Dad's going through a crucial period right now. Let's all do our best to support him." Rebecca gently stroked her daughter's head as she spoke these words. They were seen as an ideal family in their community, regularly attending church and actively participating in local activities. The school and dance studio were nearby, and they wanted for nothing in their daily lives. Still, Rebecca felt a subtle unease about her husband's recent changes. It wasn't just the busyness from the promotion, there seemed to be something else. She noticed unprecedented exhaustion and anxiety in her husband when he returned late at night. He'd been increasingly jumpy when checking his phone, often hurriedly leaving his seat. "I should be able to make it home by 8 tonight," Gregory announced, quickly finishing his coffee. "Sarah, think you can stay up until then?" "Yes. Promise." Her daughter's eyes lit up. Yet, as Rebecca watched her husband's retreating back as he left for work, she pushed away her earlier feelings of unease. A trustworthy husband, a loving father, and above all, a precious family, that was her conviction and pride. In their 12 years of marriage, the happiness they'd built together surely couldn't be false. The sound of the front door closing echoed through the entryway. No one yet realized that this peaceful daily life was about to crumble dramatically. The clock hands moved quietly but surely toward the moment of destiny. October in Boston had already welcomed the chilly season. Earlier than usual footsteps echoed through the foggy Newton neighborhood. Gregory, who normally woke at 7, had already prepared himself by 6 this morning. Rebecca had sensed something was different from the moment she woke up. Really? You mean it? Sarah's voice rang out across the breakfast table. Rebecca also paused with her chopsticks at Gregory's sudden announcement. The table held their usual bacon, eggs, and toast, but something felt different in the air. The meeting should end early today, so I thought I'd drop off and pick up Sarah for a change. Gregory was unusually cheerful. He straightened his unfamiliar red tie against his new navy suit, continuing with a smile. Besides, I haven't had a chance to really talk with Sarah lately. Their daughter's eyes sparkled. Dad, guess what? I learned a new ballet routine. It's for the next recital. Sarah began talking excitedly all at once. Her usually quiet father was listening with unusual attention. Normally he'd check his smartphone during breakfast, but today he was completely focused on his daughter. The scene appeared warm and happy, yet something felt off to Rebecca. Since his promotion, her husband had never offered to handle Sarah's transportation. In fact, he'd been canceling previous commitments one after another. So why today? Gregory, what about the important afternoon meeting? The Johnson Pharmaceuticals contract? It's been changed to online. I can join from home. An immediate response. It sounded rehearsed. No eye contact. Gregory's gaze wandered slightly. While clearing the dishes, Rebecca observed her husband. The new suit. An expensive-looking watch that wasn't there yesterday. An unfamiliar cologne subtly lingering in the air. And his hair, styled more carefully than usual. She recalled how he'd spent longer than usual grooming in front of the mirror that morning. Oh, right, Gregory stood up. There was a certain restlessness in his movement as he placed his cup by the sink. I'm getting a new rental car today. The newer models are hybrid and better on gas. But our current car is still. Sometimes we need a change of pace, don't we? An unnatural smile followed his excuse-like words. There was something artificial in the edges of their conversation. Rebecca's intuition, honed over 12 years of marriage, was sounding an alarm. Something was wrong. But what? The more she thought about it, the more her anxiety grew. Dad, you promise. You'll definitely come pick me up. Sarah hugged her father at the entrance. Gregory gently patted her head, embracing her more tightly than usual. Rebecca thought she caught a glimpse of deep sadness in his expression, as if this were their final embrace. Be careful, Rebecca called out. Gregory raised his hand without turning back. That would be their final morning farewell. As the morning rush subsided, Rebecca headed to work at CVS Pharmacy. She changed into her white coat and took her place at the counter. Checking prescriptions, conversing with patients, carrying out daily tasks. Still, the feeling that something was off lingered in a corner of her mind. Her colleague Martha approached with her usual gossip. Hey Rebecca, wasn't your husband's company the one that had that incident 10 years ago? Yes. My cousin was working at NextGen then. Seems there were some dark rumors. The conversation was interrupted by a call to check inventory. However, Martha's words continued to echo in Rebecca's mind. At 2 p.m., her smartphone vibrated. Work's running long, but don't worry, I'll definitely pick up Sarah. A message from Gregory. Attached was a photo of him at his computer in the conference room. It looked like too perfect an alibi photo. The background showed the familiar Kendall Square office, but something about the window view seemed unnatural. Rebecca stopped herself as she was about to reply. Why suddenly send a photo with the message? Usually it would just be a simple line. And why today of all days? Standing by the medication shelves, she suddenly remembered the incident from 10 years ago. Rumors of harassment at NextGen Pharmaceuticals. Rumors connected to Gregory's current position. And the sudden resignation of a female employee. Rebecca still kept the newspaper article from that time. An incident buried due to insufficient evidence. But for some reason, she remembered the woman's name, Michelle Cooper. Rebecca, is the next patient's medication ready? A colleague's voice pulled her from her thoughts. She needed to focus on the work in front of her. But she could feel her heartbeat gradually speeding up. Outside, it was overcast. As the temperature dropped, the street trees were already showing signs of autumn colors. A light rain began to fall. It was an afternoon when no one could have predicted the tragedy quietly but surely approaching. The clock showed 3 o'clock. There was still time before her daughter's class ended. Rebecca's phone vibrated again. This time, a call from an unknown number. But it disconnected before she could answer. The ominous feeling grew stronger. In the evening, the last piano notes echoed through the Wilson Dance Academy studio. The girls who had finished their ballet lesson changed one by one, heading to the lobby where parents waited. Sparkling smiles, cheerful conversation, the sound of coats being pulled over leotards. Alone in the corner of the changing room, Sarah Walsh clutched her cell phone. The screen displayed her father's last message. I'll be there in 30 minutes. Wait for me. Outside, darkness had completely fallen, and October's chill rattled the windows. The rain had become steady, creating a fantastical curtain of light as it reflected the street lamps. Sarah, are you okay? Still no sign of your father? Miss Julie asked with concern. She was a veteran instructor who had taught at this studio for over 30 years, knowing even the family circumstances of each student. Yes, he said he'd be here soon. But Sarah's voice trembled. Her father had never broken a promise before. Even after his promotion made him busier, he had always at least called. By 6 p.m., the studio lights were going out one by one. Other instructors began preparing to leave. The cleaning staff was already mopping the hallways. Dad. Sarah sent another message. No read receipt appeared. She called. No answer. Her father's voice on the voicemail greeting now seemed strangely distant. Why don't you try calling your mother? Miss Julie suggested. With trembling fingers, she dialed. On the third try, Rebecca finally answered. Mom. Sarah's voice shook. Dad hasn't come. Tears began to flow. I'm scared. Rebecca understood immediately. A chill ran down her spine. All the strange feelings from the morning suddenly became real. I'll be right there. 10 minutes. Rebecca rushed out of CVS Pharmacy. After asking Martha to handle the remaining work, she hurried to her car. In the rain, she gripped the steering wheel desperately while running the wipers at full speed. She tried calling Gregory's cell phone one more time. The customer's phone is either turned off or... Gregory had never turned off his cell phone before. As a sales manager, staying reachable at all times was his principle. 6:15 p.m. 3 blocks to the dance school. The traffic light turned red. Rebecca's fingertips trembled on the steering wheel. Then her phone rang. An unfamiliar number, but she recognized the area code. Kendall Square area. Hello. Is this Rebecca Walsh? A woman's voice. Somehow familiar. This is Michelle Cooper. In that moment, everything connected. The incident from 10 years ago. The sudden resignation. And her husband's behavior this morning. I need to talk to you about Gregory. As Rebecca pulled into the Wilson Dance Academy parking lot, the red lights of police cars caught her eye. 2 patrol cars. Mrs. Walsh. A young officer approached. Yes. Your daughter is waiting inside. But before that... The officer paused, as if choosing his words. According to witnesses, your husband was here. Rebecca froze. The sound of rain seemed to fade away. Why was he here? Behind the officer, a colleague was checking security camera footage. In the video, her husband getting out of an unfamiliar car. And in the passenger seat. Mom! Sarah's voice rang out from inside the building. Rebecca took a deep breath. She needed to stay calm now. For her daughter. And to learn the truth. May I see the security camera footage? Rebecca's voice was surprisingly steady. The officer nodded and held out a tablet. There was the man with the red tie she'd seen this morning. His new watch gleaming. And the woman in the passenger seat. The same face as in the newspaper article from 10 years ago. Michelle Cooper. All the pieces suddenly connected. Something crumbled inside Rebecca with an almost audible sound. But she would think about that later. For now, she clenched her trembling hands and turned toward the building where her crying daughter waited. The rain continued to fall. The rain was still tapping against the window of the interrogation room. Surrounded by the gray walls of the Newton police station, Rebecca silently watched the security camera footage. 3:15 p.m. Gregory's car stops behind the dance school. The passenger door opens, and Michelle Cooper steps out. Black dress, high heels, and an expensive brand bag on her shoulder. Everything perfectly calculated. Ma'am, let me confirm once more, Detective Derrick spoke in a gentle voice. This Michelle Cooper worked at NextGen Pharmaceuticals 10 years ago, correct? Rebecca nodded quietly. Her memory went back 10 years. Yes. There was a harassment case then. That's right, Detective Derrick spread out some documents. Actually, we've received new information about that case. Old newspaper articles on the desk. Internal whistleblowing from HR, buried evidence. And a female employee forced to resign after a sudden demotion. Everything was connected to James Murphy's promotion, who had been Gregory's superior. And 3 months ago, your husband took the same position. The detective's words tightened Rebecca's chest. It was the same method of promotion. The security footage continued. Gregory and Michelle appeared to be arguing intensely in the car. Then, as Michelle breaks down crying, Gregory hurriedly moves to the passenger seat. She approached him systematically. The detective laid out new evidence photos. First, making it seem like coincidence. Chance meetings at restaurants. Casual conversations at coffee shops. And a gradually deepening relationship. She planned everything to exact revenge on your husband. The detective's voice continued. First acting like I'd never have an affair. Refusing several times before getting involved. Then saying, "You're special." Each word stabbed at Rebecca's heart. But her expression remained calm. Yesterday, we received an anonymous tip from her. Detective Derek opened a new file. Illegal transactions at NextGen Pharmaceuticals. Suspicion of insider trading. And your husband's name. The security camera captured the moment Michelle got out of the car. In her hand, a small USB drive. Packed with company confidential data. Her plan was perfect. Seduce your husband, gather evidence of wrongdoing, and then. The detective's voice caught. She planned to expose everything in front of your daughter. Tears finally glistened in Rebecca's eyes. But they weren't tears of sadness. Detective, Rebecca's voice was surprisingly steady. I have a proposal. The next morning. Headlines in the Boston Globe. NextGen Pharmaceuticals executive arrested for covering up 10-year-old harassment case. Former HR director confesses to evidence tampering. Victim's courageous testimony reveals truth. Gregory Walsh's name appeared nowhere. Instead, a large arrest photo of former Vice President James Murphy was featured. Mom. Sarah stared at the newspaper at the breakfast table. Is Dad not coming back? Rebecca gently stroked her daughter's hair. Dad will be living somewhere else for a while. Why? Adults sometimes make mistakes, sweetheart. Some people acknowledge their mistakes and try to make amends, while others. Rebecca's phone vibrated. A message from Detective Derek. Michelle Cooper has agreed to testify fully. In exchange, she's withdrawing the charges against your husband. Another drama was unfolding beyond the screen. In the police interrogation room, Michelle had begun to tell everything. The truth from 10 years ago. The threats and cover-up. And her twisted plan for revenge. I was wrong. Her voice was completely different from the one in the security camera footage. Meanwhile, Gregory was alone in a suburban apartment, greeting the morning. Divorce mediation papers lay on his desk. And an email from Rebecca. You made 2 choices. One wrong, one right. The wrong one was betraying me. The right one was choosing to protect our daughter at the very end. That's why I won't completely condemn you. But this will be our last conversation. Goodbye. Outside the window, a new sun was rising. 1 month later. Rebecca had returned to full-time work at CVS Pharmacy. Her salary had increased, and she'd been approved for a new mortgage. A quiet suburban neighborhood. The new house had a small garden. Sarah had transferred to Boston Ballet School. She was slowly regaining her smile in the new environment. Most importantly, she had grown to cherish her time with her mother. "Hey, Mom," Sarah asked one night before bed. "Are we stronger now than before?" Rebecca hugged her daughter. "Yes, I think we are. We've definitely grown stronger. Sometimes tragedy makes people grow. Sometimes betrayal teaches us about true bonds. And sometimes, losing something helps us see what's really important." Rebecca gazed out the window. The season was moving toward winter. The bare trees quietly waited for spring buds. A new life had begun. 2 years later, in a Seattle cafe, Michelle Cooper was reading an email. From Rebecca Walsh. "Your testimony revealed many truths. And it gave courage to many women. Hate only breeds more hate. But truth always opens a path. May your new life be filled with happiness." Outside the cafe window, spring rain fell quietly, as if announcing the beginning of a new season. Gregory was working at a small pharmaceutical company in Chicago. Not in management. But he never failed to video chat with Sarah every weekend. Little by little, he was trying to fulfill his responsibilities as a father. And Rebecca and Sarah. A large calendar hung on the wall of their new home. Next month, Sarah would play her first leading role. The Boston Ballet School's spring performance. Rebecca's seat was reserved in the front row. Time flows, wounds heal. And people find new happiness, each in their own way. In the twilight after the rain, Rebecca watched her daughter's profile as she stood by the window. A strong yet gentle profile. A profile facing straight toward tomorrow. In that moment, Rebecca was certain. This wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of a new story.